So, we're going to talk about the community opportunity. This story starts back in 2006 when I was working at Canonical. And about 6 months into my job there, where I was leading the Ubuntu community, I got an email that started like this. And it came from a kid who lived in a rural village in Africa. And he told me the story that he'd spend his weeks earning money around his village by doing chores. And then on a Saturday morning, he'd spend 2.5 hours walking to his local town. He'd spend all of that money to buy about an hour's worth of internet access. And he'd spend that time contributing to Ubuntu, and then he'd walk 2.5 hours back. When I received this email, it taught me two things. The first one was, it's incredible what people will do when they are passionate about something and they feel part of a movement. When that's not just a kid in Africa, it's one component in a broader movement. And the second thing was, it really zoned in on my job as a community leader or a community manager is to get him the most value out of that 1 hour. And we've not just seen this in Ubuntu, we've seen this applied to the consolidation of knowledge around the world with Wikipedia. We've seen the incredible revolution in open source, which is powering devices in the cloud and infrastructure. We've seen atoms and bits coming together with the maker revolution. We've seen the democratization of funding with crowdfunding. We've seen many of these principles brought inside of businesses to break down silos and stodgy old companies because people just don't want to work in a cube anymore. And we've seen a profound impact politically with examples such as the Arab Spring. Now, when you look at these cases and you look at the data, you often see these kinds of hockey stick curves. People fundamentally like to get together to do things collaboratively and have meaning in that work, whether that's in social media, 3D printing, open source, or beyond. The big question in my mind has always been why? Why is this? My goal in my career has really been focused on trying to understand every nuance of that, of how that works. So as Michael very kindly shared, I used to lead community development at Ubuntu and Github and at XPRIZE, but these days I'm a consultant. I work with companies to build communities either wrapped around a product or a service, or to build communities inside of businesses such as financial services and larger organizations. In my mind, we have to take away all of these screens and these presumably fake trees. They're very realistic looking fake trees. And we need to accept the fact that we're animals. And as animals, we have a very consistent set of requirements and needs and urges and things such as that. Fundamentally, the majority of us want to live a life of dignity. But to live a life of dignity, we need to have a sense of self-respect. Now, to develop that sense of self-respect, we need to be able to contribute to our local communities, to our businesses, to our families. But to be able to contribute, we need access. And this gets to the heart of why we've been seeing this recently. When you look at the growth in technology, it's become pretty exponential. It's cheaper, it's more accessible, it's more available than ever before. But when you combine that with the growth in connectivity, that's why we see the kid in Africa being able to do that. That's why we see these kinds of hockey stick growth curves happening. This, incidentally, is actually the growth of mobile in Africa for thematic relevance. The thing to remember here, of course, though, is that technology is exponential, but people are actually pretty linear. Has anyone read any books on behavioral economics in this room? You should all go and read this. It's kind of a blueprint for how people tend to think. We need to put people on a predictable path, of a guardrail to help them move in the right direction. And when we do that in the right way, we can unlock all kinds of collaborative opportunities. But I think we start out with intended value. What do we actually want to do here? Now, a lot of the companies that I work with will only ever look at this one. What do they want to get out of a community? What's in it for them? What are the benefits for them? But if you only focus on that, you build a really boring community. We need to look at what can the individual get out of this. So for example, for the company, companies love user growth and brand recognition and support and feature development, all of these kinds of things. But for the individual, they care about solving problems, meeting people, networking, having fun. So when we identify both of those, we actually have the architectural underpinnings of a really effective and high potential community. Now, if we do this well, we can generate remarkable value, and communities have seen this in many different examples. I'll illustrate this with two examples, Wikipedia and Linux. Now, the first type of value is content. 22 million plus articles on Wikipedia, 285 plus languages it's been translated into. With Linux, or a broader operating system, tens of thousands of developers, hundreds of companies, many of which compete with each other. This content is generated by a collaborative set of people mapped all over the world who are connecting through technology and through that connectivity. And when you do this well, what you get is incredible value in a financial perspective. The Smithsonian valued Wikipedia at tens of billions of dollars, and the Linux Foundation did a study, and they found that to rebuild a typical open source platform, it would cost just under $11 billion to do that with commercial best practices. We've seen this applied in many areas. I mean, I could go on for hours with different examples of this. Harley-Davidson and SAP with million-plus member communities. Procter & Gamble had the Being Girl community, which is a community for teenage girls to ask their, at times, awkward questions. That spread to 40-plus countries. And then Random House's Figment community is an example. So the follow-on question here, then, is how do we do this? How do we put this into action? Now, this is a very short talk, and we can't go into too much detail, but I want to cover a few core pieces. The first thing I think we need to realize, and I say this every day with my clients, is this is a culture challenge. It's not a technology challenge. This is not about picking the right platform. This is not about Slack versus Mattermost versus Discourse versus LinkedIn versus whatever else. It's about building a culture, and building cultures is hard. There is no silver bullet for how to do this. It's about instilling the right core ingredients into that community of collaboration, of building meaning, of building belonging, and then iterating and iterating and iterating and evolving that. Now, we are going to be in the session after this, in the workshop, going into this in more detail. I think we've actually moved the rooms. It's not in Staffordshire. It's in the room right next door to this, which I think is North Essex. That's right, North Essex. By the way, if anyone goes to England, don't go to North Essex. It's not as nice as that room. But I'm going to summarize 5 of them, in my mind, the things to think about here, and then we'll delve into this in a little bit more detail in the workshop that's following. The first one is you have to make community part of a product. A lot of people will go and hire a community manager, and that person's tasked with building a community. And what happens is they become an ambassador. Everybody else thinks that community manager's got that covered, and you develop a silo. Don't do that. The community should be part of your product. You should be part of your business. That's the only way to build that effective culture. The second thing is to really understand your audience. This is about understanding their motivations, their fears, how they're rewarded, what they read, where you find them, and prioritizing that. You can't attract all of the people all of the time. The third thing is what I call producing your big rocks. These are your major objectives for the next year. Cultures are hard to build because there's so many variables. And the best thing to do is to make a plan and stick to it. And put that in place for a year, execute it, and then review how you did on a quarterly basis. And that cadence, which is number 4 up here, is one of the most critical elements that I've learned in my career. When I was at Canonical, we would ship every 6 months. And that was a predictable software release methodology. But more importantly, at the beginning of the cycle, we knew what to expect. At the middle part of the cycle, we knew what to expect. At the end, we knew what to expect. That's how you build organizational muscle and capabilities, is operating on that cadence. And then the final one here is to execute, review, and optimize. As I said, there's no silver bullet. So what you've got to do is put a plan in place, operate on that plan, and then see how you did. If certain graphs are looking in the wrong direction, hypothesize, come up with a new strategy, execute that. It's experimentation, it's trial and error. That's how we build these kinds of capabilities. I'm really thrilled to be here. I was hoping to be here last year, but I was at another event that I had to be with a client. And I'm a member of the underscore VC core community, and it's places like this which is where fantastic ecosystems are built. It's not just the conversations that we're having here today and the talks that we're having here today, but it's sharing ideas and best practices about how we can make things work for certain businesses and how we can apply them to other businesses. And I'm going to be around for the rest of the day as well. All right, thank you, everyone.